today's discussion is going to talk about creating a virtual Salesforce. There's a lot of talk these days about virtual employees. This isn't necessarily virtual employees in terms of having people work from home, but having a virtual Salesforce, or in a sense, content work for you. And that's one of the questions that comes up a lot. We've talked a lot about different sales strategies, and they're all unique. Most of the time they're designed to work together. So it's kind of like combining a lead exchange with a buying group, with an opinion sales or a survey sales or catechism sales. But basically they're designed to work together a lot of times, even though some of them are independent of each other. But if someone was to ask me what is the best sales strategy, it really does depend on your circumstances. But if I was to name one, it would be content. And the reason why content is so valuable is when you think about it, if you were to create a single article, and that article gets read once a month for 10 minutes, you've basically paid for a sales rep for 10 minutes for free with that content. Multiply that by 1,000, you've now hired a full-time sales rep who's going to be in front of customers and selling your products and services full-time for free for an entire month, every month, going forward forever. Now, to create 1,000 articles, that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time, which is why a content strategy isn't always the right fit for everybody, because you need to be able to sustain your business while you're creating content and running this all at the same time. Luckily, there are some ways to actually produce content and get sales while you're creating the content and waiting for it to be consumed by your different audiences. And some of you are wondering, well, is it worthwhile to create content? We live in such a noisy space. It seems like, what are the chances that anyone's going to read it anyways, right? What are the chances that we'll get 10 minutes out of somebody once a month? Well, there's a number of ways that the number of steps that we can follow that will make this, the probability of us, of audiences actually consuming our content much higher. So let's talk about 6 steps that will make sure that your content's getting consumed and that you're getting appointments during the content journey. All right? We've talked about a few of these, but today we're going to talk about how they interlock together. So surveys are a very valuable means of creating content. A lot of you don't realize this, but your biggest competition is Google, because if your prospects can find the answers to their questions on Google, then they don't need you. And if they don't need you, they're not going to engage you, and they're going to go and follow the content trail. And so if your customers don't need you, then you're outside of that sales cycle. And so you need to be able to produce something that isn't already readily available on Google. And surveys are an excellent means of producing something that essentially creates a monopoly for you, something where they depend on you for this information. And so surveys, essentially, you can go back and review the video. We go into much more in depth on it on that video on the YouTube channel. But what you want to do is you want to better understand the marketplace. There are some questions that can only be answered through a group of individuals. And so as you go out and talk to people and understand what's going on, you can have a monopoly on information about their marketplace that nobody else has access to. And that creates value. It helps create credibility. So surveys are a great starting point. It's also great because it creates a cadence, because you can follow up, you can share results, you can get updates, and it creates value. Now, in order to find enough data, we have put together a tool. It's listanalytics.org, but it's a great resource to help either create survey data or to complement it. So if you go to intable.com/data, you can pull some pretty unique data. So if you're looking at Office 365 users or Office 365 users that work in the healthcare space, or if you're looking for companies that recently had a server crash, you can find all kinds of data points and build a customized list, drop the list into listanalytics.org, and then you'll get a full report about what those companies have in common. So essentially it creates survey data for you based off of information that we've gathered on those companies, but for that specific list. And because you've generated this list, which is very unique, so it could be a specific region or a combination of things, it helps form data points for you that nobody has access to. Now, it's always helpful to go out and gather data as well to complement this, but this just helps make that process that much easier because, again, time is money when it comes to sales, and generating surveys can take some time, but it is a long-term strategy, so you've got to keep that in mind. Now, we talked about this a few weeks ago, but one of the biggest values that your prospects will have are rewards. So just gathering information about who's performing better than others, and there's lots of ways to do that, and we talked about that in the call. But as you're gathering information through surveys, it's pretty easy to pull off some of those data points and generate awards for companies. And then it also allows you to continue that whole strategy of a cadence where you're staying in contact, doing quarterly awards, talking about what's changed and so forth. But awards are an excellent means to get in front of customers, talk about what's working, and come up with strategies to help other companies to generate awards. So again, survey data should have a byproduct of award data because you're gathering information about companies and creates yet another excuse to get in front of companies and prospects. Now, hopefully at this point, if you've understood your audience well enough, you'll be able to have answers to questions. Mainly what the surveys will help bring to light are what's important to your clients. What are the problems? What are they worried about? What's keeping them up at night? What are their challenges? What's changing? And so based off of what you discover through the surveys, which again, you'll have a monopoly on that information, you'll be able to take that and see if you can solve some of those problems, find better ways to address it, find better ways to overcome those challenges that are keeping them up at night. And so experiments will take whatever you've learned from the surveys or to help companies perform better for awards. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to come up with experiments to address those areas of interest. And so this will further deepen your enclave of information and the monopoly that you hold on that. And it will be one of the most powerful sales tools you ever create, because once you understand the clients, understand the challenges, and then solve those problems, you can take that to any other company within that same space and say, look, I have the formula. I know what products are going to help your business, and I already have the proof to show it to you. And so experiments can open doors unlike anything you could ever imagine. And again, because you're the one that's performing these experiments and you understand these clients, it should make it much more easy because you can walk into any other clients. And if we go back to listanalytics.org, you can go back and build data points on any other company that's similar. So you can come in here and say, look, these are the types of companies that this experiment applies to. I can go back and build a list of companies that have the same exact criteria. That way I can almost guarantee the same type of results that you've seen through the different experiments that you're running. Hopefully that makes sense. But once you come up with these data points, it would be worthwhile to create an article to share what you've learned. And whether you're successful or not, it doesn't matter. People are just as interested in its failures as they are in successes because they want to avoid it. But there's a number of magazines for any industry that you're working with that would be very interested in the experiments and the surveys and all of the data points that you've been gathering, especially with surveys, because that's something that's interesting to them. So rather than paying thousands of dollars for half a millisecond of people's attention on PPC or selling ad space on Facebook or LinkedIn, imagine getting 10 or 20 minutes in an industry magazine for free and actually getting people's attention through the articles and helping establish significant credibility through the information that you're sharing within these articles. And so once you start creating content, you got to look at the different avenues to share this content. So you can email it out. We've talked about that in different calls, but you can talk about emailing it with people, sharing it with the people that you've surveyed and thanking them for their time. You can also publish it in lots of articles and LinkedIn. But once you start distributing the content will start working for you as if it was a virtual sales rep. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. Now we can take this further. And again, all of these create a cadence, and that's kind of what we talked about earlier, that throughout this process, you should be generating appointments. You shouldn't have to wait until this shows up in a magazine to expect a phone call. As you're interacting with companies through surveys and sharing this information and following up and asking questions and inviting people to participate, all of this should be generating conversations which should lead to sales. And so you shouldn't be waiting until the end game to actually have sales conversations. It should be happening naturally throughout this process. So keep that in mind and try to use that as an angle as you're working and engaging with companies throughout this entire content generation process. But we really are in this for the end game, and that the content should help sell your company on its own. But you have to remember that the content itself should enable you to create that content cadence where you're engaging and talking to companies and actually providing them with information that they're interested in consuming and maintaining contact with them to make sure that the timing is always there so that whenever the opportunity arises for them to use your service, you're always in front of them. And so that's one of the key strategies in any sales strategy is maintaining contact with a client but also making sure that they're actually staying engaged. Now, the last step in this 6-step process is publishing your book. And so this is something you want to keep in mind from the very beginning. As you're formulating this, you want to make sure that you're performing surveys and running experiments that can ultimately be captured within chapters of a book. And so each article, in a sense, becomes chapters. And so you want to plan it out accordingly so that you don't have to rework this too much at the end. But each section, each article, each experiment should form a cohesive message that goes into a book and answers questions for whatever industry or space that you're trying to cater to. And there's a lot of great sales appointment strategies that even with forming the book process will generate appointments unlike any other strategy that's out there. And if you wanted to learn more about that, we did a call about that specifically. We won't go into too much details with that. But as you're going through this process, you're creating credibility, you're getting in touch with clients, you're creating opportunities that wouldn't normally be there because, again, nobody wants to be sold to. But as you're engaging them through this angle, you'll find it's a lot easier to have sales conversations. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is create a virtual Salesforce so that people consume your information and your content and ultimately find their way back to you because of that. There's been a lot of companies that have built their entire success from a single book. One of the most successful commercial real estate company in the world was built off of a single book because of how much traffic and interest that it brought for them. Now, there's another great strategy. Once you get to the book phase of your content strategy, Amazon makes it really easy, and we talk about how to publish a book on Amazon in one of our videos. You can find that on the YouTube channel. It's pretty simple. But once you create a Kindle book, Amazon lets you send that book to other people using the Amazon email server. So you can upload up to 999 emails at a time, and they'll send it out for you. Now, it does cost you 99 cents per book, only if they actually accept it. Only about 30% of the people that you send it to will actually accept the book. But you also get paid for all the books that you send out as well. And so essentially it costs you 60 cents per person who reads the book. But to pay 60 cents to have somebody spend a few hours learning about your business is worthwhile. So that's what it looks like when you're sending it out. You can also send a custom message so you can talk about the book, talk about your business. And it's a pretty cheap email system when you think about it. And so that's really about it. Just to kind of recap everything, there's those 6 steps. We need to engage companies through surveys in order to create unique content to better understand their space, use experiments to further expand the questions and the insights that we've gained through the surveys. And the surveys and the experiments themselves will generate sales naturally. So you're not going to be out of pocket too much in this whole content process. But all of those, because it's unique content, you're going to be able to provide enough value to your clients to better understand how to help them. And essentially all the content combined over a long period of time will become a virtual Salesforce for you. And as you continue to add to that, you'll be adding a few minutes every month of a free virtual sales rep. And combined, they will help each other. But essentially it's a long-term investment, but it pays off really well over time. And that's what I believe is probably the best sales strategy, is generating enough content, using the right types of strategies and the tools that we talked about today to create something that would be valuable, other than just trying to offer somebody something when you think the timing is right. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Next time we talk 2 weeks from today, we're going to be talking about a price sheet sales strategy. It's similar in content, but different. But hopefully you can join us then. If not, we'll make sure that you get a copy of the recording. And again, thanks, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.